what's this? It has all come crashing down soon. It all has to come crashing down soon, in fact. Mudahar, what are the words?
Hello guys and gals, me Mudahar. I got a bit of a short little video that I wanted to talk about in regards to why the AAA games industry, I really think, at least specifically, should crash and burn.
Damn.
Games are expensive. And, you know, with all the prices jumping up from $60 to $70 to $80
to $100.
To what I guess people are thinking by the time GTA 6 drops to $100 per game. Yeah, it's not looking that pretty. Now, one thing I want to start off with is I don't want to see the console war or any war in the comment section below. There's a lot of moving parts here, and I'm not going to sit here and blame one person or the other. I will, however, throw every one of these companies under the bus right now real quick. Not too long ago, we looked at PlayStation. They jumped their prices up a little bit across the world in special
What's this as well? Tariffs?
regions for that PlayStation
Is it the tariffs?
5. Yes, one of the most boring gaming generations as of right now. Yeah, all of it is going up in prices. Xboxes,
Crazy.
do you know that they're
What are they doing? Is there another COVID 2.0 coming?
pricing those things up, ladies and gentlemen?
What's happening?
How up? Well, if you decide to get the cheapest Xbox Series S, it's going from $300 to $380. You know, you have to do some
That's
crazy
a markup. Yeah, that's a markup. That is fuck me.
black magic to get somebody to buy an Xbox in the first place, because we all know how quick those are flying off the store shelves. Yeah, you know, that's just going up. I mean, you know, for some crazy psychopath that thinks a 2 terabyte Galaxy Special Edition is $600 originally, now it's $730. They probably should be shot into the Galaxy for thinking this is a reasonable increase.
Fucking hell.
Nintendo Switches.
Yeah, it's right though, man. Fucking the prices are ridiculous.
Prices go $629.99, meaning you go to the fucking store, you get the Switch and a game. You're probably looking at like I think $800 at least after taxes.
Fuck all that.
In Canadian buckaroonies to go pick up a little handheld Switchy. There's going to be a lot of people who are trying to convince their wives' boyfriends to put that money down.
Yeah, don't buy it. How did you get the money?
But you know what? Honestly, everything's just getting way more expensive here.
Yeah, it's
and,
right.
You know, I used to live at a time where, you know, granted, when the PlayStation 3 dropped, I'm not super old, I'm 31. But, granted, when the PlayStation dropped, you know, it used to be a time when I remember the PS3, you know, it dropped at, I think it was like $600. You know, motherfuckers had to go and get their kidneys removed to get that PlayStation, okay? That wasn't even getting the game. But obviously, if you waited, as all good things come to those who wait, I guess, you would end up getting a PlayStation, you know, down the road. It would slim up. You get the little Ozempic running through these consoles. They'd slim up. They'd go hit the gym. Bam! You get a cheaper system. Yeah. And then sometimes they'd really hit the Ozempic gritty. They'd like double barrel that into their bodies. You might get a super slim towards the very end of a console generation.
Yeah.
It seems like this is the only generation where if you don't buy a system day one, quite literally, 4 or 5 years down the road, you're probably just going to end up paying more across the board, okay? It might be one thing if this is like a pro version of the console where it was mostly geared towards people that just had an insane amount of money to begin with or a lot of disposable income. But you're looking at even the cheapest options going up, it ain't looking pretty, okay? I used to recommend buying like a console, like the cheapest console, if you couldn't afford PC gaming. You know, if you didn't, because generally speaking, that Xbox at $300 was not a bad deal if you wanted to play something like GTA 6 day one. Even a computer that could play GTA 6 online.
That's good. 300, that would have been nice.
Would probably not cost you $300 at the time to run it, even at its most minimum settings, okay? Unless you really stretched your dollars and sought a sale. That's not the world we live in, ladies and gentlemen, with how wild supply chains and how wild tariffs have become. It's an entire hobby that's become exponentially more expensive as time has effectively gone on. But one of the things that I wanted to talk about more specifically before we go back to the hardware stuff, which actually really isn't the fault for a lot of these companies, is the increase to that $80 game. Now, recently I was at the Xbox website,
that shit's
and
fucked.
Around May 1st they announced some pricing updates. Oh boy, let's read the pricing update. So some of our
every time you see pricing update, just know the price is going up. It's not ever going down. Like, what the fuck?
new first-party games will launch at $79.99 beginning this holiday season. So, beginning of this holiday season, Microsoft is, expecting that, yeah, those AAA big budget games we're launching, they're going to be $80. So what kind of games you
them shit AAA big budget games?
Imagine probably Call of Duty. Let's be completely real here. And, one of the things that I've learned in the gaming circle is when you're on the internet, you're a very loud vocal minority. In reality, every time I go to like a GameStop or something and I see somebody pick up a copy of Call of Duty, pick up a copy of Madden, pick up a copy of NBA, which, bro, at this point, the game might as well be a fucking casino you go to on
FIFA.
Vegas with a basketball mini game attached to it.
Yeah.
All right, yeah, those are still being sold like crazy. These games are hilarious because if you go to their user reviews, it's like 3 out of 10. Like the people buying this shit feel like they're purchasing actual dog water, but yet they still buy it.
They still do it. It's self-punishment.
It's like the amount of people that complained about the Switch 2 prices, and it's like, I'm not going to go get a Switch.
They get it
Then
day
you
one.
immediately read the next day, oh my God, it broke all pre-order records. Bro, that's why the industry is allowed to get away with fisting you pretty much without any lube at any given time, okay? Because people just can go and buy it. Now, when it comes to the increase in video game prices, one of the things that obviously leads to that increase, like why a video game went from $50 to 60 to 70 to 80, is there is a genuine truth to video games getting more expensive to produce, right?
Yeah.
So, for instance, let's say that
as the tech
you're
goes
somebody
up,
that wants to play like the new GTA, right? Like, if we look at it from a mathematical perspective, like Red Dead Redemption 2 cost them $170 to $240 million Rockstar to make.
That's crazy when you think about it. When something shit like Concord cost, they said something like 900 million or maybe something like 500 million, say, or Shadows costing as much as it did 400 million. Look what they done. They done Red Dead Redemption 2 of 240 million. And that game's phenomenal. That pushed the boundaries of the console at the time. PS4, I think it was.
Doesn't include the extra $200 to $300 million it cost
PS4.
for the budget for the marketing. So let's just look at the cost for just the payment of developing the game. That's almost $250 million.
Yeah.
Now, if you go back to
That's a lot
San
of fucking money.
Andreas, which is a far simpler game in comparison to the heavy hitter that is Red Dead 2, from just a technical perspective, it would cost Rockstar at the time, I believe, if you adjust it for inflation, $15 to $23 million.
Adjusted for inflation.
That's how much money you're looking at for developing the game. And obviously, the marketing is effectively double that. But yeah, games are just substantially more expensive to produce. It's kind of crazy when you look at the development and time for a video game. It kind of rivals that of like some of the most insane Hollywood masterpieces. Like AAA gaming is such an expensive behemoth because teams have jumped from tens of gamers, tens of programmers, tens of developers
to
hundreds of developers, artists, individuals that are doing tons of different jobs to create our different video games that we all know and love, okay? To conceive making a video game is not something that starts, in like year one. It starts year one and probably ends like year 7. Like realistically looking at a game like GTA 6, for how impressive that it is and how much we all gawked over it, I'm sure that the game is probably a concept since GTA 5, and since then, development
100%.
has sort of happened. There has
100%.
been an actual paper trail, a receipt for development beginning probably since then. And obviously that ramps up as the years progress, but ultimately it's a game that costs hundreds of millions of dollars to make.
Yeah, I
and
wonder how
obviously
much.
for a game company, it's not the day where they exclusively develop games for one console. No. In order to make your money back, you got to be developing for everything. PlayStation, Xbox, phones even, PCs, everything.
Yeah.
And everything has to hit on every cylinder for you to make as much money back as quickly as you can, and hope to God that if your game has some live service component, probably also starts generating hundreds of millions of dollars every year. That's just how expensive a video game, and that's how expensive the demands have gotten. So sometimes a video game is successful. Like, obviously, nobody's going to say that Red Dead 2 was a failure. Obviously, very successful for Rockstar. But there's also games that cost hundreds of millions of dollars to produce. Games like Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, which is one of my favorite games. But if you ask Square Enix, obviously, I'm sure it wasn't the most, selling game in their mind. It wasn't the game that met expectations. In fact, it apparently failed to meet expectations. And I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that they released it exclusively on a PlayStation 5. It was the second part of a trilogy, a pretty popular trilogy, mind you. But generally speaking, those sales do tend to drop off. And when you have like a 50-hour commitment for the previous game requirement to go into the next one, yeah, I'm sure there's plenty of people that are probably going to skip or at least wait until everything is out in a convenient like $60 package down the road in like 2030. So yeah, it's a tough industry to kind of be in, and it seems like it's getting more difficult for the AAA people. Now, if you ask me personally, I think that for most games, I was reading somewhere that like I think it was over 90% of PC gamers are playing older games. And while this is skewed with people playing stuff like Roblox, Fortnite, Grand Theft Auto Online, games that are regularly updated but obviously released probably a decade ago at worst, yeah, those games are still obviously very popular. But I think for a lot of older games, like me personally, dog, I've been playing so much MGS Phantom Pain. I've been playing like Arkham Knight again, a game that might as well, I think it's basically almost a decade old at this point.
Arkham Knight.
A lot of these older games.
Yeah, and I'm playing Alien Isolation. It's like 10 years. 10 years old.
In my opinion, just kind of hit harder. Like, there are 30-hour games with, 30-hour worth of experiences, and they don't stretch longer than they need to. I haven't played Assassin's Creed Shadows beyond the initial, 2 weeks. I haven't even finished that game because while I enjoyed 10 hours of its gameplay, I didn't want to do that 10 hours 10 times over repetitively just to see a credit screen roll through. And honestly, I think the AAA industry is probably more so threatened by the fact that games like Expedition 33 exist that have released at price tags under $60.
That's what they got to do, man. The independent ones, they got to do it like that. Do it cheap, man.
Made by a group of 30 people that has actually gotten 2 million sales in 10 days that it's been out. It's fucking crazy, to see some success happen that's not in the AAA space. When a game company comes out and produces an actual masterpiece that resonates with gamers versus just being an open world checklist slog that you're basically digging through. Because if anything, I feel like I've been
because then it becomes a chore. You're not playing a game, then you're doing a chore, and that's not nice.
Talking about the game industry crashing, and honestly, when it comes to the AAA side, I am so fucking ready to see this industry crash. Simply because if anything needs to be reset, it's probably those bloated AAA development budgets. It's probably the expectation of this industry that if gamers are expected to pay $80, shouldn't the quality also...
The game's got to be fucking all masterpieces.
Go up beyond just shinier graphics. Shouldn't games be taking real advantage of the hardware we provide them and hardware genuinely advancing? These are things that, honestly, if the industry isn't willing to address, there's a real big black pill here, right? Gamers only have a limited amount of money to be spending every year. If you're going to be telling somebody who can only afford 3 games now if they're priced at 80 or maybe $100 a pop, they're going to be having to pick. If they're going to pick between AAA,
you will see piracy rise.
People, they're probably going to look at GTA 6 first and maybe the extra 2 games. So really, these companies are kind of, putting competition between each other at a much more intense pace. And that's not something I think is absolutely sustainable down the road.
And it's horrible to the consumer.
Companies like EA, Activision, Ubisoft, hell, even Rockstar, a lot of these companies are really going to be having to put each other on the chopping block. They're really competing with each other at the end of the day. Because when it comes to things like indie gaming, for me, indie gaming is pretty much where I'm at these days. I've been playing a lot of this one game, Cubic Odyssey. The demo came out, really been enjoying it. Games like No Man's Sky have obviously been attracting me as many times as it's updated. But even from a single-player perspective, games like Signalis, which cost me a fraction of a $60 game, but give me hours of actual fun gameplay, memorable gameplay, is the kind of stuff that I actually end up chasing. Especially as a lot of AAA companies are kind of relying more on remakes to kind of stave off these
it's so sad.
Budgets as time goes on. I really feel like it's the indie market. The market where games are $20-$30 a pop, but they give you actual hundreds of hours of gameplay is where things are really important. Why would I choose to buy another tactical shooter when a game like Ready or Not exists for a similar but smaller price tag, yet gives me actual hundreds of hours of gameplay that I can play with myself or cooperatively with other people? It's a weird industry, and honestly, the prices going up is literally them just competing with each other.
Yeah,
and I think that's going to become very apparent.
And it's greed as well. We need to get back to basics.
2026, when games are probably going to be priced at least $80, maybe $100 a pop, and these companies are absolutely going to have to be fighting with each other for the actual gamer's dime at that point.
Yeah.
Now, there's a lot of greed that I think companies are pretty responsible for when it comes to the industry, right? Let's be real. when a game jumps to $80 on a digital
God
perspective,
damn,
it's
bro.
probably due to the fact
What are these fucking prices?
that in some way, I think
It's
gaming
horrible.
companies have to find a way to make sure that their
That's
hardware
horrible.
can kind of make up. So generally speaking, in a lot of cases, most hardware companies, like whether it be like Microsoft, PlayStation, or Nintendo,
This has got all dribble on his beard and shit.
generally it'll be the hardware sold at a break even.
Boy looks sweaty.
Maybe you'll make a little bit of money on it, or sometimes it can be sold at cost, right? So let's say that it takes you, I don't know, $350 to make a console. You sell it at like $300, and your expectation is somebody probably buys a controller or they buy a game to make up for it. So I really feel like hardware is where most of the pain is really coming from. Now, to give you an idea, guys, there is a lot of panic due to tariffs, due to like massive issues around the world, where one of the companies in the world, one of the biggest hardware companies, Apple. And now these guys don't make gaming consoles, but you can definitely game on a MacBook. You can game on an iPhone these days. You can play Resident Evil 4 Remake on the most up-to-date iPhones. But let's say you go and pick
Crazy. What the fuck?
up the new iPhone 16 Pro Max.
For £5,000.
Okay? Don't really know this naming scheme, but for $1,200, okay, I used to think phones back in the day, if they priced it at this, should suck my cock. Now, back in the
Yeah.
day, you had things like the iPhone 3G. Now, this senior citizen
Remember
of
that shit?
technological design,
Fucking hell.
you know, I was basically playing
This
like
is the first full touchscreen phone, mate. They all copied it.
what, flash game style things on this. You know, really tiny thing as compared to a modern iPhone, all right, which is significantly larger, significantly faster, and you can play actual RE4 Remake on this, which
That's
I think is
actually
actually kind of
crazy.
insane that a
That is.
handheld device is doing it. But a lot of that comes from the chips within this. The same chips, the same design, the same computer semiconductors that power our consoles exist in our GPUs, our phones. It's a pretty common thing amongst medical equipment, military equipment, really anything electronic comes and requires chips. So a lot of companies like Apple, Nvidia, Tesla, Microsoft, a lot of these big tech companies fight for the factory time of one company specifically known as TSMC.
They're the ones killing it.
Now, this is an aerial shot of TSMC in Arizona. Now, TSMC is a company from Taiwan, and they basically, from my understanding, produce 90% of the chips internationally.
That's crazy.
So to give you a rough idea,
Taiwan.
companies like Apple or like companies like AMD or whoever produces the CPUs and GPUs for a lot of our
That's
consoles
mad,
and cell
isn't it?
phones and like cars, everything imaginable. Typically, they have, you know, people in their companies that spend millions, hundreds of millions of dollars. Hell, it can go up to like $1 billion from time to time, creating and basically designing chips, right? So roughly, you'll use EDA tools. You basically design a chip, and then once you have a design pretty much thought after, your real confidential design, companies like this will go to TSMC or these fabricators. Basically, the largest fabricator is TSMC. They'll tell them, hey, listen,
Make
we
this.
need you to make this chip.
Yeah,
Now, the
crazy.
reason why TSMC is so important is that, A, production of chips is really difficult. Like, I think TSMC spends somewhere like $100 billion to
God damn.
open up like 2 plants. So it's, A, an expensive thing to go down with, but the process of building a computer chip is insane.
Yeah, like what the fuck?
Okay, so to give you an idea, you need to go
Man.
get silicon first. In fact, producing a computer chip, I think like a professor of mine put it the best way. You can't ever call somebody dumb as rocks, because we as a human species has basically, like, we've found a way to get rocks to think. Basically, you
That's
go out, you
crazy,
get silicon,
innit?
you get like
Silicon.
ultra pure silicon, this ingot, you slide it into very, very thin discs, okay? Very thin discs we call wafers. Using technology like photolithography, okay, we basically take these designs and find out how to etch them onto actual silicone.
That's mad.
And after a whole bunch of different chemical treatments, we have magically found a way to turn a rock into a very complicated piece of circuitry that is used in most of the technology we use out there. In
It's mad, innit? Humans, man.
fact, thanks to that technology, you're able to
Humans.
watch a fat Indian guy tell you about this process over a high-definition video on the internet.
Yeah,
Okay,
that's
that's how
crazy.
crazy this shit is.
Yeah.
So because of things like tariffs, right, on a lot of these semiconductors coming out of China, or Taiwan specifically, it has basically put the United States in a pretty precarious situation. So on one hand, you can be annoyed at the tariff, but to look at it in the most charitable fashion, it's a way for America to effectively force its industries to start producing these chips.
That's
locally.
right. Yeah.
And it's not to say that
And that's
locally
what Trump.
chips can't be.
That's the sort of stuff that Trump wants, and I think that's ultimately a good thing. Is like to create that competition in the market, it will drive prices down, and the consumers will all be happy. That's what he's wanting to do. Is trying to make a competition there, so they start making it at home instead of having to rely. You know.
Made. Like there's other fabricators other than TSMC, like Intel.
And it's bringing economy and everything.
Samsung is also pretty good at fabrication. There are other fabricators, like I think Texas Instruments, but making a computer chip is a very, very specialized field.
Yeah.
And it requires very, very intelligent people and very expensive pieces of technology to create these things at the scales we want them.
Can you imagine
So
the
for Apple,
machines?
this basically costs,
The machines
you
you
know,
would
them
need. Fucking
apparently
hell.
around $900 million in a hit onto their actual like sheets once you factor in tariffs down the road. So every company, Microsoft, Nvidia, Apple, are basically scrambling to move their chains to places where they can minimize this bill as much as they can. So it's one of the reasons why games and, well, game products have gotten significantly more expensive, and that's probably the only part of this entire puzzle where I can look at these companies and say that's not actually greed, that's more of them actually trying to figure out how the fuck we're going to be avoiding a really expensive slap to the face.
Yeah.
But generally speaking, the AAA games industry, to kind of like highlight this back into what it needs to be, I really think that needs to crash. Games are getting to $80 price tags a pop as of this like holiday. And by the time next year comes around, by the time GTA 6 drops, I actually don't really doubt that games might even be $100 a pop by then.
Fucking
and
hell.
honestly, in a field where I think that a whole bunch of
That's too much, man.
You know, indie games have sort of spiked up and sort of come out and basically gotten the attention of gamers.
I remember when they went up to 40 quid. From 30 quid, it used to be $29.99 a game when they come out. And they went up to 40 quid and then 50 quid. And I thought, whoa, 50 quid's like, it's too much. Now it's taking the fucking piss. And even then, when I went at 50 quid, I was thinking, damn, at this rate, it's going to be 100. Look where we're at. Ah, mate. Now we'll say it. It'll be 200 soon.
There is no better time to be, in my opinion, an indie game developer and sell games for a fraction of the AAA industry's cost, especially when a lot of these guys, maybe they're not making the most prettiest looking game in comparison, but playing a game like Schedule 1 or Shadows of Doubt or, well, Clair Obscure Expedition 33 is a very pretty looking game, but obviously it's not a big AAA release.
No.
Playing games like that over at least what the industry is still producing, these open world slogs that are supposed to be 100-hour adventures that realistically get boring after 5 or 10 hours. Yeah, I think it's a great way for indie gamers to really shine up, indie games to really shine up.
That's
and
right.
Basically the place where gamers spend most of their time putting their hours into. I feel like a lot of this industry really aims to create the next big like live service product, and even in the AAA space, you see
like,
so much
fucking hell.
like the constant overuse of artificial intelligence. It seems in massive projects like Call of Duty, to the point where it feels like yes, the project is big, the project is bloated, the project may look nice, but ultimately, I don't think it's worth that $80 price tag, and I know that it's not worth that $80 price tag, and I know for a lot of you gamers watching, it definitely isn't even close to the $80 fucking price tag. But yeah, indie gamers, man, I don't think that industry is ever going to die anytime soon.
No way,
I think
bro.
For all of its considered,
Ain't no way, bro. Everyone's going to be looking at them going, come on, man, provide us with the real shit. These AAA cunts are letting us down, and they're going to deliver.
It's probably
as they have always been.
Gaming alive, safe, and secure. And I do absolutely envision a crash of the AAA industry.
Yeah.
Where
like a reboot.
When you got games like Grand Theft Auto 6 vying for the same attention that other $80 games are now asking for, maybe $100 down the road, I feel like it's not going to be just Ubisoft that's facing the music. I think it's going to be companies like Square Enix that are spending millions, hundreds of millions of dollars on every big project, when realistically they don't even need to. Realistically, it should be that their projects are, you know, priced appropriately to produce, and they make millions, down the road. Games like FF7 Rebirth should not be financial, like, underperformers. They should just be better produced games, or more intelligently produced games at this point, too.
Yeah.
But I think it's going to require more of these big publishers to crash or ultimately downsize their projects before the industry kind of gets it. Okay?
True.
Like, it's just a wild place.
Let it be.
It's just so goddamn expensive these days, and it doesn't, in my opinion, really need to be. I think if anything, gamers have shown that if you just price something at like $20-$30 and have a game like budgeted accordingly to that price tag for production, I think gamers are more likely to give you money down
Yeah.
the road for a product that is better produced,
He's
better
right.
respectful of the gamer, and ultimately, even looking at something like Obscure 33, they've been able to do something that I don't even think modern Final Fantasy or Dragon Quest or really any of the big AAA houses have even been able to accomplish.
Yeah.
But that's just where my thoughts are, ladies and
Nah,
gentlemen.
he's right,
If
man.
you like what you saw, please like, comment, and subscribe.
a
Dislike
good
it,
one.
dislike it. I am out.
It's a good one. Always a good one from the boy. And yeah, it's gonna have to be indies. We've been saying it for a while, and this bloated price point is getting ridiculous. And also, you'll see a rise in cracked games. People sailing the high seas, as they say. That will be happening with this price hike. So yeah. Anyway.